Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Louisa here. You're somebody who's been involved in the event and activation world for quite some time, and now you're at Scene Presents, which leads and does some of the most impressive activations that there are. You've got amazing clients you've been working with, like TikTok and Netflix, and this is a space you've been in for a long time, and you've really figured out how to master it and to make iconic brand experiences around the world. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So just kind of going back to the beginning, like how did your interest in this specific category and world, happen, and what made you want to be into this? Like how did this passion start?
So it first started at university. I helped on what we call a graduation ball. I did all the kind of the planning and the styling for that and got the
Mm.
bug. And I started as a project assistant. So like what, 21 years ago now, I guess. I started as a project assistant and worked my way up from there. I basically had most of the roles within the delivery of experiential brand experiences and events, from project assistant up to project manager, project director. I had an incredible first female boss with my
Mm.
first job within that space, who really taught me, the power of live experiences and how to be passionate about it. And I just loved this feeling of like we could completely change someone's day by something that we were designing. And also we could completely change the trajectory of a brand through live experience and how they engage with consumers, how they cultivate that brand loyalty through emotion. And I was hooked. We have this motto at Scene Presents where we ask our clients and we ask our employees when they first start, like, do you remember how you felt at your first live experience? Mine was Lauryn Hill concert, and I remember the scale of that, this kind of emotion that she created in me, and I was like, I want to make people feel like that. And that's what we kind of try and have in our DNA at Scene Presents, is like, how are we going to make you feel when you enter that room when we're designing things? So that's kind of where I started and never looked back.
So how has like designing experiences kind of changed over time, like since you began to where you are now? I mean now you obviously have it's a different kind of scale in terms of what you're doing, but I mean, were there certain principles that have kind of stayed true throughout this time?
Yeah, I think designing experiences now, they're kind of split, right? So for us, we're designing experiences for consumers, but also for B2B, for businesses. I think the biggest shift I've seen is in the B2B experiences. They used, when I started, they used to be a conference with a PowerPoint display and a rubbish cup of coffee. Now, B2B experiences really show up more like B2C experiences. People are wanting to be edutained. They're wanting to, learn things, but also be entertained at the same time. They're wanting to get really hands-on with your brand, and we're having to create really tactile, participatory experiences in that B2B sphere. So if you think about like Cannes Lion or CES, or I'm in New York at the moment for New Fronts and Upfronts, like, those are B2B experiences but they present as immersive, experiential events. And that is because I think to convert something as a brand, to have ROI, to make money, you have to make people feel something. You have to create that like fandom. We talk about fandom all the time, is that investors in businesses, they need to see the fandom and that loyalty that you're creating with your consumers, but they have to feel it too. They have to walk in a room and really understand what your brand stands for, the values, and what they're purchasing and what they're investing in. So I think probably that's where experiences have changed. They can't be passive anymore. You really have to take people who are attending on the journey and make them feel part of that experience from the moment they step in that room to the moment they leave.
Yeah, so there's this immersive aspect that seems to be really important today.
Yeah, it's like all the senses. If you think about, we live our life on our phones and our laptops, essentially, a lot of the things that we engage with and that entertain us are screen based. And live experiences have a job to use all the senses to really create that brand resonance and that, memory piece. So when we're thinking about brand experiences now, we're not just thinking about what people see, but we're thinking about what they smell, what they taste, what they touch, what they're going to hear. Because, research shows that is where you create those long-term memories. If you think about all your memories, holidays, concerts you've been to, you probably remember the sights, smells, the sounds, people that you spoke to, engage with. Those are like long-term memories. And that is how live experiences have evolved, that, we have to think of them in a really 360 way, because that's what's going to build that resonance.
So, what made you want to take over and be a part of Scene Presents? Like, how did that opportunity kind of happen, and what made you want to do it?
So I was presented with the opportunity just over 3 years ago. I have always been a great second in command. I've always said, like, give me a vision and I'll deliver it. I'm a deliverer. And I was a little bit dubious about becoming a founder and an MD. Could I really be the person that sets the vision as well as delivers it? And I think it took my peers to remind me that, running a business is essentially about leading people into battle. You have to build a rapport with your team, your clients, your suppliers, and you all have to work towards this common vision. You have their back, they have your back. And that's how I've kind of lived my whole career. And I was genuinely excited about building a business that was successful for like who we were as well as what we did. And that was like the point of difference that I wanted. And I think that's partly what's made Scene Present so successful is that, if we say we're going to do something, we will do it. We build this real in-depth trust with our partners. And that was something that I wanted to be at the core of the culture of the business that I built. I also really wanted to create a space for female leadership. There's not that many female leaders across all experiential agencies in the UK, in the US, globally, and it's a relatively male-dominated industry at the top. It's driven by women for sure, but I think it's something like over 80% of the workers within experiential and brand experiences are females, but less than 20% are leaders. And I really wanted to change that. So we have a really robust mentorship program. We have training to try and build females up in our business. And the final bit is I thought there was a gap in the market for our proposition, which is we make the intangible tangible. So that bit that I just spoke about, in that, we are engaging more and more and more with brands on our screens. How do you bring that brand and everything that brand is known for into physical spaces for B2B and B2C, and show the power of that to, finance and procurement, and how that can really increase ROI for brands? And that's kind of what we're known for, and that's why we get these briefs, because it's not only does it look great and it's creative, but it's really creating that monetization piece for brands and building that brand legacy. And that's the gap that I saw.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to talk to you a bit about this too, so it's good you brought it up. Like, how you think about creating these types of experiences for specific brands. Like, because TikTok is very different from Bacardi, which is very different from Google.
Yeah.
Like each one is their own world and they have their own ecosystem and they think about things differently. How do you kind of get into their world and create something specifically for them and do it in a way that stands out? It isn't just kind of the same type of put their branding out there in an activation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is definitely, you hit the nail on the head with the challenge, in that, especially if you're pitching or you just start to work with a brand, you've got a few weeks to get into that brand, as much as the person that's briefing you that could have worked there for over 10 years. So usually what we start with is actually not the what, we start with the why. Like, why is this brand wanting to do this brand experience? Why are they wanting to show up in this space? We dig into, what their consumer demographic is, the locality that they're showing up in, and what the culture that might be surrounding that. So we really dig into the why, so that the way that we're going to show that, represent that brand in that space makes sense, because that's what consumers and B2B audiences are getting much more savvy at, is that it really has to make sense to the brand's values, the brand's proposition, and also their values of the people that are attending, so that it really resonates with them. So we start there with the why. We'll then often look back at like what they've done before and what competitors are doing in the market, what's standing out, what's not working. So a little bit of analysis there. And then it's like I said at the start, it's the question we were like, how do we want to make people feel? How do we want those people to feel when they stand in that room? And how do we want them to feel when they leave that room? Because what we're trying to build is legacy. Live experiences can sometimes be under a lot of pressure from procurement and marketing and finance to be like, well, how are you going to prove the ROI as much as a out of home campaign or whatever? And the answer to that is legacy. You have to carry that emotion and that feeling of that experience out of that room so that people talk about it, people share it on socials within their wider network. And the way that they're going to talk about and share it is if you genuinely made them feel something, whether that you made them feel empowered, you made them feel seen, you made them feel educated, you made them feel excited, whatever that is. So we start there, like what is the emotion? And then we build a whole experience around that.
You just have to figure out how to capture that emotion and like understand it and what makes it different.
Exactly. And every brand is trying to create different things, you have to get quite nuanced on the emotion. Like everyone wants to feel excited. Like I get that. But
Yeah.
like what are you trying to make them to feel excited about? So is it your new brand proposition that is actually going to relieve them of stress, for example? Is it something about your brand that's going to bring them joy? Like if you think about Pinterest, the whole proposition is about creating space for joy, so that when you walk in their spaces, you feel inspired, you feel empowered to maybe do that at home. Whereas TikTok, for their creators, that's all around making them feel in control of their creativity and making them feel like they have the tools to create amazing content so that they walk out of that space feeling much more confident in that. So those are the kind of nuanced emotions that we're trying to tap into, and then hopefully create experiences that bring those to life.
Do you think it's different when you're creating stuff in Europe versus the US? Like, do consumers expect different things?
I think it's the scale in the US. The scale expectation is much larger here. I know it. I know it's a catchphrase, but everything is bigger in America,
Yeah.
and that goes the same for live experiences. And I think um, American consumers and also American businesses are exposed to bigger and better all the time. If you think about, Super Bowl, the Grammys, the Emmys, like all of your, big experiences are, the scope of the creativity is quite vast. So when we're showing up with brands here, we really need to think about how are we going to impress and how are we going to create an experience that will drive people here, whereas in the UK and Europe, it's maybe a little bit more on the smaller scale. So I think, yeah, usually when we're doing experiences here, we think like, how are we going to go bigger and better? However, again, taking it back to the primary principle is like I would challenge like agencies and brands out there in that don't just do something for the sake of doing it. So if you're going to do something in America, and yes, it is at scale, but go back to the why again. Why are we going to the Super Bowl? Why are we putting on this experience, and why does it need to be this big? Does it make sense for us as a brand, and does it make sense for the consumers attending? That's what I think we should always try and challenge ourselves with.
Yeah, like the value proposition has to resonate and needs to
Mm-hmm.
be on brand for sure. I mean, it's amazing that you've got a team of like 30 something people and you're able to have this kind of prestigious level of clients and be able to execute all around the world like that. Is there something you do management wise that enables you to do that? Is there a certain way that you kind of delegate?
Yeah, I mean, building a business at speed does have its challenges, but I think um, what I try and do for the team is I tell them all the time that we're building our armor. Every project you get educates you, makes you better than the last person. So take every experience as a positive, even the boring ones, because it's going to make you better than the next person. So every challenge, we talk about building our armor all the time. I think the other point is around, trying to expose ourselves to the industry as much as possible, seeing what's out there, seeing what other brands are doing, what other agencies are doing, so that we could try and learn from trends, but also better on those trends. And also giving people the visibility of like what their progression can be. You know, we're, like I said, we're 3 and a bit years old now, and I think all the people in my team can at least see what their career path could be, where we could go as a business, and it's like taking them on that journey, because I'm building something, it's mine, like that's great for me, but what does it mean for all the staff? And you've got to get them, you know, really invested in that vision of your business and take them on that journey and update them all the time so that they feel part of that.
Yeah, makes sense. And you got to you got to build this cohesive team as you go for sure. What
Mm-hmm.
was it like taking over? I mean, and just really embarking on this during COVID? I mean, it was a pretty difficult time to get involved, and you had a lot of different aspects coming into play there. Especially there was less in-person stuff in general, and a lot of activations, experiences is all around being in person. What was that time like?
Yeah, it was um I have mixed feelings about COVID. I think what COVID did was it actually gave us some tools that we didn't have before. We all essentially learned how to be TV producers. So it gave us that hybrid ability, you know, and hybrid is still part of our lives. It's like I said, it's what gives us the legacy for brand experiences. So being able to put on really top quality broadcast was a great thing to come out of COVID. I think it also gave us the tools to work remotely. You know, like you said, we work across all sorts of countries. We worked in 9 different countries last year, and being able to have that hybrid work pattern was really useful. I think the challenge that it had was we were so heads down in survival and building. You know, I set this up just after COVID was coming out. Like our first event, we still all had masks on. We were doing COVID testing or whatever. So we were allowed to do in real life events, but it was just starting. And I was really heads down in building a business and trying to make a mark for ourselves and coming up with a proposition. And in the first kind of 8 months, I forgot to look inwards and forgot to look at the team that were working really, really hard to build that business with me. So I think the other thing that COVID taught me is that you have to continually look to reward your team, especially in this industry, because it is hard. You know, we work long hours, there's a lot of pressure on deadlines, so making sure that we're recognizing that hard work, rewarding that, and COVID taught me that, because I think before COVID we were just always on this treadmill and getting going, and COVID taught us to pause
Mhm.
and be like, you know, why are we doing this and what's good for us, and I want my balance and all of that. And I think that setting up a business, that's been my biggest learning, is that I can be a little bit like a hamster on a treadmill, you know, building this thing, and pausing to recognize your team is really important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it did a lot. There was some benefits that came out of COVID, but I mean, the ones you mentioned here, I think are clear ones. I mean, obviously, it was not a great time in general, but
No,
yeah, the
got, but that's
benefit.
like I said, build your armor, take the positive out of everything.
Yeah,
Trying to take the positive out of COVID,
you got to.
and take those forward.
Are there certain like areas and events that you like really just enjoy creating experiences around, maybe more than others, and what would those necessarily be and why?
Do you know, you'd think I'd say like festivals and parties, but actually what I really enjoy is solving business problems. You
Mhm.
know, B2C is the glamorous bit of our industry. If you think of like Coachella and even the Super Bowl or whatever, but actually the thing that drives those B2C experiences is the B2B experience in the background that's happening. And we've really enjoyed as an agency, and I have as well, is building that proposition to really help brands know how to show up in B2B spaces and prove that doing that is giving them ROI and also making them money. So what I love is a brief for something like Cannes Lion or CES or a New Fronts or an Upfronts, where you have to figure out how you're going to bring a digital brand's proposition into a physical space, make people understand what that proposition is, make people feel something, and make people take away that knowledge, take it into their business, and drive revenue going forward. That is creatively and strategically quite challenging. It's really rewarding when you get it right. And, you know, that's the bit that I'm excited to build more on and really get exposure to those marketing teams, who set the strategy for the brand. Sometimes that doesn't filter down to events. The marketing strategy stays at like advertising, out of home level, and then it trickles down in this like upside down funnel, and then you end up here with a little bit of money left for brand experience. And what I get really excited about is when we can get in those conversations at the top and really show and prove how brand experience can help them deliver that marketing strategy and make money essentially. And it'll help them make money like nothing else ever could, because it's where you build that emotional piece.
Do you do you prioritize like the how much interest do you even have necessarily in the in-store kind of activations, those experiences versus like the event ones? Like, is that another area that you really care about a lot? And do you see like being able to really have as much innovation around as the experiences around events that you're mentioning, like CES and Canline?
Yeah, I mean, I think, some of the brands we work with do have a shop front, but definitely our sweet spot and where we add value is the brand experiences that are out in the world, so to speak. I think, because what we're trying to do is build brand worlds. We're trying to build a world that you can walk in and it feels like Netflix, or it feels like TikTok, or it feels like Amazon. And most of the brands that we work with don't have physical spaces to do that in. Netflix is obviously massively evolving. They've built Netflix Bites, they've got Netflix House coming up, where they're going to have that ready-made world. But to scale that is where we come in, where you're doing pop-ups and you're showing up, and that's what we're trying to do. It's almost like we want to make you feel like you're in the platform. So I think we've got more scope there to really understand the brand's values and proposition and bring that to life in physical spaces if they don't already have one.
Like, what are your future aspirations now? Like, what's kind of your big picture vision? I mean, you've got some amazing clients, you're doing really interesting experiences. Is it kind of the plan to continue to grow in that sense? But like, are there certain big goals that you have, this big picture, grand vision for what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this is going to sound, but my ultimate goal is I'd like to be the go-to brand experience agency globally for helping brands make the intangible tangible. I'd like to really own that proposition. I'd like to do more projects overseas. I think there's so much scope in Asia as well as the US to really push the boundaries on brand experience. But then I caveat it with I'd like to do it while keeping the who again. I said at the start, it's like I really wanted to build an agency where we were known for who we are, not just what we do. And one of the dangers of scaling is that you lose that. You lose that culture, you lose that quality, you lose that way of working. So I want to scale in a considered way where we keep that. But the ultimate goal is to just keep doing bigger and better and more interesting projects that really stretch us as creatives and stretch us as strategists. But yeah, I'd love to have the headline Best Brand Experience Agency.
That's awesome. Well, that was all the questions that I had. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think you've created some amazing experiences that enable you to connect with brands in ways that really weren't possible or even heard of before, and they're so creative, and it's so important. I mean, brands really need to channel their voice into physical experiences that make you connect with them differently. And I'm just excited to see how you continue to get to the goal that you just mentioned and what's to come from here. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.